All right, on today's episode of Locked On Avalanche, the Colorado Buffaloes with a very big win in college football over the weekend, and Deion Sanders let everybody know about that. Do you prefer his style of coaching or our Jared Bednar quiet, confident way? We'll talk about that and the state of the Central Division right now on Locked On Avalanche.
You're Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Locked On Avalanche podcast. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Chris Maselli. With me, as always, Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. Thank you for tuning in, making it your first listen of the day. That's always appreciated. Make sure to follow us on social media outlets, LOPN_Avalanche on Twitter, X, Locked On Avalanche. Yeah, on Instagram, questions, comments, concerns, opinions, lockedonavalanche@gmail.com. And follow us on YouTube. Hit subscribe, get notified when a new show goes live. Definitely subscribe to our subtext as well. Link to that is in the show notes below. Subscribe and you chat with Kyle and I one-on-one. All right, sir, you can see our rundown. We will be talking about the Central Division. We're going to be doing that over the course of the next couple episodes. We're going to do the Central Division, kind of talk about the state of the Central Division, what the future holds for the Central Division, and we'll also get into predictions for this season. And then we'll do the Western Conference and then as a whole, and then we'll do the league as a whole in following episodes. So we'll get to that in a minute. But we weren't planning on talking about this, but before we hit record, we could probably do like a whole nother episode just based on what we talk about before we even hit the record button. Kind of like the Office outtakes. There's like 10 extra seasons of The Office just on the outtakes alone. And we were talking about the Buffaloes and that huge win that they had over the weekend. What 20 plus point underdog, you know, the whole just craziness surrounding Deion Sanders, even before the game even started, all leading up to it. They win, fantastic game played. And in the aftermath, during the press conferences and things like that, it is not in Deion Sanders' genetic makeup to be quiet about that. Nor should he really be quiet about that. I think he heard a lot of people kind of questioning whether he could really make it at this level. And he brought in his own team, whether you like that or not, and they went out and won. Great. Good for you. First game of the season. And in those press conferences, he was leaving nobody in his wake. He was pointing out everybody saying, you said this. And that some people love that. I'll start there because what we want to do here is kind of compare the coaching styles between Deion Sanders. I mean, they are complete polar opposites of how Deion Sanders goes about his coaching style.
But they both wear incredible suits.
They do. Well, I mean, Bednar is one of the most best dressed guys in the league. You can't doubt that, right? So, and Bednar is the opposite. He is just that quiet, confident guy. So, which coaching style do you prefer here?
You know, when we were, and again, like the before and after of every episode, I'm telling you, it's we talk about a lot. But
yeah,
in this conversation, just you think about it in that position, like, would you not embrace just kind of like almost like the chaos and the firestorm in that situation? Like, especially because we're talking about college football, there is 100+ coaches all saying the same thing. And all the everydayers that listened last week, we were talking about the Athletic articles about just don't do things as you always done. And this league needs to embrace like the young voices and the new voices and fresh voices. Mm-hmm. How many times do you hear a coach say pucks in deep, quick shifts? We got to get them in, get them out. We got to get shots on net. Like you could close your eyes and you don't know what coach is talking because it's the same thing. And it trickles down to the players where you get your Connor McDavids. We played a great game. We got the pucks in deep. We pressured. We made the right shots. It's the same thing. Like hockey press conferences are just a snooze fest.
Yeah.
Then you look at what the Buffs are doing and taking receipts, knowing everybody. Like you doubted us, we got you. And you took down this is not just the first win of the season against Middle Tennessee's state A&M South. No, this was this was
Big win.
TCU. This is a big team from last year. So you have that little moment where you can just do as everybody else does, or you could be different. And like Bednar, honestly, out of all the coaches in the NHL, he could also have gone this route, like being an assistant coach for the Columbus Blue Jackets AHL team, and then like working his way up. Like, was a very bad South Carolina Stingrays player. It's just
was it like, minus 92, I think, or minus 82 or something like that.
Plus minus numbers. Like he
but here's
could
the thing, man.
raise the cup and just say, "Hey, you all doubted
screw
me.
all my haters." Right?
Yeah.
No, but he's not built that way, right? Doesn't matter what he'd gone through, he'd never be that way. And you said, like, why would Deion not act this way, like in the moment? I have no problem with that. No problem about taking names, taking receipts, or however he said it. It's the context on what I might have a little bit of a gripe with, because if I played some of that press conference stuff and just kind of the aftermath, like if I showed like someone that doesn't follow college football and some like social media comments, they probably would say to me or feel like the Colorado Buffaloes just won the national championship. So you can go after some people that were hating, no doubt about that. But just the vibe I got was, this is what you're going to get all year. You in terms of us winning and just over, you're already overcoming the odds, right? So how I said it to you before we hit record was, sports always comes back around. There is always that big slice of humble pie that you are going to have to eat one way or another. And that's, I kind of have a little bit of an issue with saying things like that, like we're keeping receipts after the first game. If you want to cycle back to that after you're in a bowl game, no problem with it. But when you kind of say things like that, it's like, okay, like, look at your schedule. You have some difficult games coming up. And even if you don't win those, it's fine. But if you compete and you push that team like Oregon or USC to the brink, and it's like, the game's not decided till the 4th, maybe that's a moral victory for you. But I don't know. I have, like, I've seen it, been watching sports a long time, Kyle. There is nobody that stays on top 100% of their career. It doesn't happen. And I think just because of that, I'm not that like live in the moment in terms of like, we just had this win, so I'm going to spout off and make it seem like, we're the best thing in the world right now. And I just got a little bit of those vibes. And maybe it was the moment. Maybe it was in the moment. And I get it. Like, you say things and you do things differently when emotions are running high. But Deion's been around the block. He knows, like, it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows for an entire season. And that's why I like Jared Bednar style, because he knows that. He knows, like, look, like this any sport is a fluky game. And yeah, that was a great win, but we got another game in a day or two and anything could happen then. And I don't want things to say, and that's what Deion is doing. The things that he's saying now are going to come back around and haunt him. And I just don't want that for him. And I don't want that for, not that he can't handle it. Of course he can handle it. But I think you're just putting unnecessary and unwanted pressure on your team now, because you're making these grand statements and saying, like, look at us now. All right. It's, you know what I mean? I don't know. There's some people that love that side of it and don't care what happens next week, because what's happening now is great.
I was just about to say that. I know you said things level off and they're the parity in sports and it'll come back around, but we also live in the here and now. Like, right. Does anybody remember the 2001 Seattle Mariners? Stellar season. Nothing came of it. How about last year's Boston Bruins team? Fantastic year. It's a footnote. But people remember guys like Joe Namath, Mark Messier for those guarantees. The Ray Borks, I'm never losing again in the playoffs.
Right.
Hey, guess what? You don't.
Yeah.
When you make claims like this, you better go back it up. So Coach Prime, he put himself in that position. But Bednar, what he's doing, he's making a hockey machine. He's letting his work speak for himself. And there's two schools of thought in that. And what Bednar is building right now, he's letting all the work speak for himself. Like, he can go out there in his camouflage suit. He can look like a Ken doll. Like, he could do all that and let all that keep going, but he doesn't embrace it because he lets the work talk for itself. And when they put themselves in a bind, he tells the team, get yourself out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he allows them to get themselves out of it. See Alex Newhook. He gave him every tool imaginable, gave him that 2C, and he worked himself down to Montreal.
Right.
Like, he's gonna let you do the talking, and you have to back it up. And he just sits there and he takes the first shots because he's the coach, but it's really on the team.
Yeah.
But how Bednar does it, it's a long, sustainable thing. But like you saw Rachel Toss of Altitude. When LSU lost, she's like, well, I guess I'm now a Colorado Buffs fan because they're now the hype. They're the cool thing to do. Right. And do you want your here and now impact? Because that's what the Buffs are doing. Or do you want your Jared Bednar Colorado Avalanche impact where you're building for the future? And that's what the Avs have been doing and will be doing for time to come. Yeah.
I'd say this. I think I think Deion is the right man for the job in college because it's what they need. They do need someone to be like that. Because just let's say, I'm going to anger you right here. Let's say Deion is the new head coach of Alabama, right? And he goes in and he starts saying, we're taking receipts. I don't think he's going to say that if he's coaching Alabama, but they have a history of winning. And someone goes in there and has that mentality and that kind of like, dialect and talking like the way that he is and saying things like that, it's probably not going to go over well. Here, I think it's welcome and I think it's needed and it's wanted. And it's just a different situation than it would be at another school. So it's working. It's working right now. Just long term, I don't know how those things really is, because if the winning doesn't happen, people start getting a little like frustrated, like, well, you're talking the talk, but you're not walking the walk. So right now he's doing both. And God, I hope that lasts for a long time, but that remains to be seen. So let him have his victory lap. He's earned it. It's deserved. But football, just like any other sport, is a fluky game, and next week is a whole nother week.
Yeah, because if this talk is getting to Avalanche circles, where we're talking about it right now, Colorado State is also listening. So they'll see you Saturday.
Yeah. So we'll see. So, all right, let us know what you think in the comment section. Two different styles, both work. What's your preference? All right, let's hear from AG1, and then we will get into the Central Division. But our next partner, AG1, it's the daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. Kyle and I drink this stuff every single day. There it is. There is that beautiful green AG1 coffee container, which holds that delicious AG1. Kyle is he's gonna Price is Right model that thing while we you do a wonderful job at that, sir.
I've missed my calling, my friend.
Yeah, so we drink it every day, literally, because it just helps us feel good. It supports your gut health. It's the foundational nutritional supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health, and it replaces your multivitamin probiotic. It replaces that multivitamin and probiotics. There we go, and more in one simple drinkable habit. It's science driven. It's got full of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food sourced nutrients. And it helps you build your health and your foundational health first. So if you want a comprehensive solution, if that's what you need from your supplement routine, try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Just go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag and the number 1.com/NHL network. Check it out. You'll thank us later, and so will your gut. Well done, sir. All right. The state of the Central Division. I think, like I said, we'll get to the Western Conference as a whole, likely on Wednesday, and then the whole league. We'll probably have a crossover again on Friday, and we'll do the whole league early next week. But the Central, where do you think the Central stands within the 4 divisions? The East is a beast, right? So you probably list those 2, 1 and 2. You can have a discussion on who's 1 and who's 2 between the Metro and the Atlantic. And then you're probably looking at the West being 3 and 4, and then you probably have a decision on and a conversation on who's 3, who's 4 between the Central and the Pacific. A lot of people are kind of just feeling like the East again is going to go beat itself up, and that could have a very different look in terms of who's in the playoffs. And the West, people kind of think might kind of remain the same. But as far as the Central goes, how are you feeling about the Central Division? You feel it's like competitive, or is it just very top heavy?
I think if the everydayers listen to our crossover with Locked On Ducks, JD, and talking about just the West being secretly tough, which is true. And you could honestly, we'll talk about this when we talk about the league. I think the league got tougher, but I don't think the balance of everything has shifted that much.
No.
I think just the tough got tougher and the good got gooder. But I really feel like that's it, because teams like Arizona, they really did not do anything to improve their chances. Like St. Louis, there's not much improvement there. It's about the same. There's a lot of teams that understand where they are. Like Minnesota, we had a crossover with Locked On Wild. They know what they're doing. They know what they can do cap-wise, how they're going to have to be handling their draft picks going forward. So what they have is basically what it's going to be. And I like when I said in our predictions, like the Stars might miss the playoffs, I'm still not sold on that team. Like Matt Duchene's not going to change the world. Yes, Robo's really good, but when you go top to bottom in the league, and we'll look at it in just a second, tell me what really changes in the power of everything.
Nothing.
It's Colorado at the top.
Well, I mean, of the Central, it's Colorado and Dallas. It really is. And I know you kind of took a lot of heat for saying like Dallas would miss, but and that's the problem is I don't think the division, or even the conference, which we'll talk about as a whole later, but I don't think there is so much movement, especially within a division, that Dallas can fall out. No, Dallas they're a good team. Dallas is a very good team, and we'll get into predictions. We'll actually give our predictions in the next segment. It's gonna be them two, partly because they're a very good team, and partly because like who's pressing the Avalanche and Dallas in the division? There's really it hasn't, and that was I did take, I wasn't gonna like get into this discussion with Jason during our crossover, but I don't agree with that. I don't think the West is very good. I think the West is good for the teams that are good are good. The teams that are bad are bad.
The playoff teams out of the West are good.
Yes.
There's that clear separation. The playoff teams are good, but everybody else, forget about it.
They're not. It's not a strong division. Again, it's not a strong conference. I mean, you have to feel incredibly confident that the Avalanche are going to make a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's a question at all. And it's really, it's going to be a two-headed fight for the division. Can they take the division? And in the grand scheme of it, I don't think the Avalanche really care. Sure, they're going to go out there to try to win the division. Sure, that's part of it. If they don't, then they're going to be number 2 in the division, and that's just fine for them. I don't know. It's a odd thing for the Central right now because it's very, very top heavy.
And I think the moves that you see Colorado and Dallas, because those are the top 2. Everybody else, you can talk until you're blue in the face about who's going to be 3, 4, 5. But it's Dallas and Colorado because they are building, because Colorado set the standard on how you put a team together when they won the Cup. And honestly, the years prior, and working on complementary pieces, how you handle the goalie situation, how defense is structured, like getting away from the days of your 6'6" defenseman that just kind of bodies people into the bench. We're away from those days. You build around a Cale Makar kind of guy. But Dallas and Colorado are the deepest teams in the Central. Because the rest of these teams, like last year, that's what derailed Dallas. A couple injuries, their season the writing was on the wall. Like it was a lot to come back from. And honestly, that's what derailed Colorado. And with the moves that Colorado made this offseason, you see they got deeper. It's not like they plug it like a big name into the roster and that fixes everything. They got deeper. We're talking lines 3 and 4 and who's not going to make the roster kind of deep. And Dallas could have that same conversation, which is why they're the 2 top teams in the Central.
Yeah. And what do you think of the future of the division? We're gonna discuss that, and as well as our predictions on how we feel like this season is going to play out. We'll talk about that next. All right, so the future of the Central Division, and like I said earlier, with the the whole Deion Sanders thing and how sports come back around, it's the same for teams, right? Like as a whole, teams that are bad get better, teams that are good have their moment, and then they kind of circle around, and maybe they're not that so good in the future. But as far as the future of this division, maybe right now is not there, in a discussion or argument for like tops in the league. But I think you got to feel relatively good about the Central. And I think it starts with obviously Connor Bedard. You know what I mean? So where things are for that team, again, we'll get into predictions in a minute. But you have some really exciting young up and coming players pretty much across most teams. There's a couple I want to talk about that you're kind of questioning, like, okay, what's their prospect pool like? But you have to look at teams like Chicago and obviously the Bedard thing. And man, like, I don't think Arizona is going to be as bad as everybody thinks that they are this year. They're going to be bad, but are they going to be this team that you can just chalk up 2 points? I mean, that never happens in the NHL. But they're not going to be a team that you can just roll over. And maybe I'm saying that as an Avalanche fan, knowing that the Avalanche struggle with the Coyotes the past few seasons. But as far as the future goes for the division, I kind of like where it's at.
Yeah, and you got to look at take the division as a whole. You have your top team, like your elite of the Central. It would be Dallas and Colorado. I mean, I think you would be correct in thinking that. Then you have this block of teams. You have your Winnipeg, you have your Minnesota, and you have your Nashville that knew what they were. They don't know what they are. They're still figuring it out, but they're putting a team together to figure it out year after year after year. Then you have your teams like St. Louis that are on the downward trajectory. Like, things aren't working out. Something has to shift, whether it's in the draft, pulling in a big name player. Like, you hear the rumors that Patrick Kane might be a Red Wing. He could be floating out there. Be a nice addition to somebody like St. Louis, in my humble opinion. But I'm not a Blues fan, never will be. And but they're on the clear decline. Chicago is on the ascent. They finally have their piece to build around. You don't have your Tays and you don't have your Kane. You need somebody to build around. Bedard is where you build around. They're going to be on the ascent. So in the future, Chicago is going to be working their way up past the Winnipeg, past the St. Louis, past the Minnesota, because they know where they're going. Arizona, they confuse Colorado because they are confused themselves. They have no plan. They don't even know where they're going to play half the time. And they don't know what this team's going to look like, how they're going to build this team, what this team's jersey is going to be, what their team name's going to be. That team's in flux. Why they confuse Colorado is because that is just pond hockey with NHL hockey jerseys. There is no direction. They just get out there, play hockey, and they're not playing for anything.
No,
they're to break hearts.
But I mean, they're playing for, if they know they're not going to, ascend in the standings this year. But that's the weird thing with Arizona is, if they can just keep a team together, you have kind of a very good starting outline of a team. I think 2 of the best players in the division, one plays for Arizona and Clayton Keller, and the other plays for Winnipeg and Kyle Connor.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys are phenomenal players. But you don't know if either one of them is going to be there, because that's kind of what teams that are bad do. They sell off assets and build up. They get prospects, they get draft picks. But it seems like Arizona's been doing that for a century now. And at some point, you have to stop doing that and say, like, no, these are the guys that we are keeping, and building around and going from there. Winnipeg, that's your prototypical team that does well, and then when they do bad, they'll sell off assets and kind of get back on the upswing in a couple of years or a few years. So you don't know where Kyle Connor is going, but they have they have an all-world goalie there. Mark Scheifele's not like, you have really good players. And I think the same is true in Arizona. You have obviously Clayton Keller, who is just so fun to watch. Schmaltz is there, Michelli is there, Lawson Krause is there. Like, you have good pieces. I'm just not confident that they will hang around, just because it seems like that's how Arizona does business. We will always be a bottom dweller because we never want to put keep the guys around that are really good, because things are going bad. Let's sell them all off. You just can't run a team the way that they run it and feel like you're just going to have this one flash in the pan season where everything gets better. It doesn't happen. And you're not bringing in guys for like free agency because you don't know if they're going to hang around there. It's just a really bad situation in Arizona. And I don't like to see that, because you do like to see the small market teams finally get something that clicks, and you get really good prospects in the draft, and then they show up and things start happening. But they just, for some reason, just don't do it that way. I don't like it.
Yeah. And Arizona and Detroit, they're like alternate timeline versions of each other. Like, Detroit was building an identity, and Arizona's identity is building. That's all they're known for. They're honestly the purgatory for AHL players and bad contracts.
Yeah.
And you're not going to pull in a free agent that way, with that mindset of spending the last 5 to 7 years of just taking on all the bad contracts and all of these little parts and pieces. And you're not going to get somebody who says, yep, that's going to be the place I want to turn around. Like, the Austin Matthews thing is the only thing that Arizona could talk about, because it's a perfect scenario. But why would you want to do that if you're Austin Matthews?
That's what I'm saying. Like, you have a moment here where you can start collecting guys and collecting draft picks, and then building them up for the next 4 years, because or 5 years now, because that's the contract he signed. That's a perfect time frame for, say, like, hey, Austin, like, you would be the final piece. We have all these young guys here that we built up over the last 5 years. If you come in, that takes us to the next level. But who's confident that the Arizona Coyotes are going to do that, are going to keep any of those guys around? It's just how, but like, so having said, let's just assume that they do keep them around. I think they have a pretty good future. You can keep building up guys, because you're going to have some low draft picks over the next couple of years too. I think they have a good future. Obviously, Chicago does. They have a really good future. The teams that are just like in the middle right now, between like Minnesota, I think Minnesota's at the top end of that, of Minnesota, Nashville, St. Louis. But who's gets you excited there as like a younger? I mean, not like the Kaprizovs and stuff. Like, obviously those guys are great, but someone like, not at Connor Bedard's level, but like a brand new guy that hasn't really stepped in yet for a team like Minnesota or Nashville or St. Louis. I don't know. Like, yeah, everybody has a good prospect, or Colorado can attest to that. They have a pretty decimated, I mean, it's getting better, but you can pluck a couple guys out and say, like, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And I'm sure you can do that with Minnesota, Nashville, and St. Louis. But for the whole, it's like the players we have now are who we're working with. So unless you make some free agent moves, I don't see a lot of movement between those three teams over the next couple of years. They'll be good, they'll be competitive, but pressing the Avalanche or the Stars for the division, I don't see it.
No, yeah, it's definitely, the Central's broken up into tiers, and I feel like it's going to be that way for maybe the next 2 years, because like you said, like, who's that next Connor Bedard that's existing in the Central right now? Like, Matt Boley is the only one I could possibly think of that
he's great.
Like, that excites me, that I'm like, oh, I have to see this. Like, oh, it's a Wild and Jets game on a Tuesday night. Why am I watching this? Matt Boley's exciting. But that's about it. Like, you don't get that on Nashville. You get superior defensive and goalie talent, but there's not a player that you're like, oh, I have to turn the TV, and the rest of that in the rest of the league. Like, you're going to get that in your Dallas and Colorados, and Bedard in Chicago. But the rest of the Central, they know who they have, and they're building around it.
All right. So predictions. How you feeling like this division is going to stack up this year? Quickly, kind of just go from From the bottom to the top. What are you thinking?
Arizona,
Okay.
Winnipeg,
Okay.
Chicago,
All right.
St. Louis, Minnesota, Nashville, Dallas, Colorado.
I'm not too far off from that. Yeah. I mean, man, I feel like, yeah, Arizona will probably finish at the bottom, but I think it's going to be a dogfight to the bottom. I don't think they're just going to be, so far out of like the number 7 spot in the division. But I don't know. Like, I think Chicago's another year away from. I think they'll be 7. They'll be improved, but the guys that they brought in are kind of they're elder statesman guys. I think Bedard just needs a season in the league. He's going to be great.
Yeah.
But we'll see flashes of it this year. I don't think we're going to get an 80 or 90 point score. I know some people think that could happen. I want to see it first. So go ahead.
I just feel Winnipeg's going to have a dumpster fire season. This is going to be a Hellebuck rental at the deadline year. They're not going to perform. It's going to be a rough year for for Winnipeg, and they're going to be moving players at the deadline. And I feel like that's where they fall.
Well, if things are going south for them, they won't even wait for the deadline.
No.
They'll just get rid of guys now. Or if they wanted to wait till the deadline, that's where people get into bidding wars. Maybe they can get a little bit more in return. We'll see how that goes. But if it's going south for them, they definitely could be 7, and Chicago could be 6. You could be right about that. And then that kind of like middle tier. Yeah, I'm thinking. And this is going to be close, but yeah. What'd you say? Did you say St. Louis, Minnesota, Nashville?
Yep.
I think you did. I think I'm going to switch Nashville and Minnesota. I think I'll go St. Louis, Nashville, then Minnesota. But I think those 3 teams will be very, very close. And then even Dallas and Colorado will be. I think that is going to be separated by like a point.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be like if you can get to 110 points, I think you win the division. I don't think either of these teams can get there, but I think they'll be close. I think it'll be like first place team will have like 107 and second place will have 106.
Yep.
So it's going to be the chunks of the division are going to be very close. The top 2, those middle 3, and then those last few are it's all going to be close. So
it's going to be a lot of standings watching towards the end of the year. You're going to be looking at, the Avalanche won, but what did Dallas do?
Right. Exactly. So, all right, that is going to wrap it up for today. Fire away in the comments section on anything that we talked about on today's episode. Want to know what you guys think. So thank you for tuning in, making this your first listen of the day. Always appreciated. For Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan, I am Chris Maselli. This is the Locked On Avalanche podcast. Enjoy what's left of your holiday weekend, and we will see you guys on Wednesday.